sbagliata, messa fuori, c'è Pirlo, ancora Pirlo di tacco, tiro,
Hello and welcome to this week's AC Milan Talk podcast. I'm your host, Amit Paul, and I'm delighted to be joined by my good friend Jason Brown. Jace, how you doing?
I'm very good, mate. Very good.
Good, man. Right, JP. No Jack this week, but there's plenty to discuss. We'll talk Cagliari versus Milan. We'll review the season as a whole, and of course, we'll analyse all the latest transfer rumours. But let's start with that defeat to Cagliari at the weekend first. I've got to be honest, Jace. I found it really hard to motivate myself to watch it. It was one of those ones where Europe had already been secured the week before.
Yeah.
And, you know, again, I'm not going to lie to you, my thoughts were kind of drifting to the summer transfer window. It's hard not to at this stage with all the names being linked. So, yeah, it was a really, really sort of quiet afternoon, but I managed to watch it. Wish I didn't, really. It was a pretty poor performance to end the season. Paletta got sent off for the 100th time in the campaign. And then my good old friend, my best pal, Carlos Bacca, missed a penalty. All contributed to a 2-1 defeat, and pretty miserable way to end the season, in truth.
Yeah.
So
I think the players were feeling the same as you, so just couldn't be asked, could they?
Yeah, it really did feel like that, especially in the first half. It was almost get the beach towels out and let's go on holiday. So it wasn't good, but
definitely saw through flip-flops on the pitch.
Exactly. So yeah, I think glad to get that one out of the way. As I said, Europe had already been secured, so mission accomplished on that front. But in terms of positive sort of notes to take away from it, it was a really nice touch from the club, I thought. Kazuki Honda had confirmed during the week he's obviously going at the end of the season. His contract runs out, and they gave him the captain's armband as his little farewell present, which was pretty classy, I think. He's not like a club legend, or he's not that massively popular, I don't think personally. But 3.5 years at the club, the game didn't really mean that much. So why not give it to him and wish him well in the future. But Jace, the one thing that kind of stood out for me watching it, again I got distracted, was just looking closely at that starting lineup and kind of wondering who would actually survive the summer and still be here next season. I want to play a little game of keep or sell with you. So we're going to run through the entire team and just kind of gauge who will be sticking around or not. So we'll start from the back, work our way forwards. I think you know my answer to this, but I'm going to let you go first. Let's start with the big man between the posts, Gianluigi Donnarumma. Keeping or selling?
I think definitely got to be keeping. Whether or not he's still there is another question, I think. But yeah, I think from a Milan point of view, got to keep the big man there.
Yep, absolutely. I think you've nailed it there as well. It's just a matter of whether or not we can keep him. We'll get to him in more depth in a little while, but definitely, if I had the choice, there's no two ways about it. You're keeping him all day. So, yep, absolutely keep. Moving to right back, Davide Calabria, a youngster, come through the ranks, a little bit indifferent in terms of his form since, this season in particular. Had a lot of injuries as well, but it's just one of those, isn't it, Jason? I think you've got to give him time to kind of develop, improve. His attacking game is really good. I think he just needs to work on his defensive work and kind of become an all-round better player. So for that reason, I think I'm going to keep.
Yeah, I agree with you, mate. I mean, he's, like you said, come through the ranks. He's only 20. Do you know what I mean? The situation with the right back at the minute, I think, if you've got young players like that coming through the ranks, you got to keep them at least, at the club. Whether or not you buy someone in and he goes out on loan to develop is another question, but I think he should definitely still be a Milan player come next season.
Yep, absolutely. Gustavo Gomez. I'm a bit torn on this one, Jace. He arrived last summer and I kind of want to give him the benefit of the doubt. It's his first season in Italy, time to adjust and adapt to the new league, new surroundings. We've seen glimpses of how good he can be, but then there's also a bit of a sloppy sort of side to his game and a bit suspect defensively at times. But again, it comes down to just weighing him up. I think you've got to give him one more year to kind of settle and see if he does become the player that Milan expect him to be. So I'd probably say keep for depth next season. What about you?
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I mean, like you say, one season needs, another at least another season to see where he's at. The standards of defending in Italy are so high as well. It's probably kind of having an influence on how he's being viewed, I think. But yeah, definitely, he's had this season to get used to it. See where he's at next season. If he's not good enough, then I think, get rid of him. But for now, I'll definitely keep.
Yep, sounds like a fair plan. Paletta, Jace, I'll let you take the honours on this one because I'm a bit lost for words on Gabriel at the moment. But yeah, keep or sell, Jace.
I think you've got to get rid of him. I think, the amount of times he spent on the bench, well, not even on the bench, like in the changing rooms after being sent off. I think definitely not the player you need going forward, especially with the takeover. You're going to have funds to go out and get replacements. So I think, just cut losses and be done with him.
I think so. By the way, that he tied a Serie A record, I think, at the weekend for most red cards in a campaign. So.
Yeah.
Experienced heads, looking at the positives first, experienced heads, he can be a solid presence in the back line, but just too much of a liability. You can't keep making the same mistakes over and over again. Didn't cost us on Sundays, it didn't mean anything, but there is going to come a time where his sloppiness is going to cost us big time. So personally, especially with Masaccio coming in, partnering Romagnoli next season, argument to keep him for depth perhaps, but not for me. I think we've got the best out of him, and it's time to sell and move on for me. So see how we get on with that one. Vangioni, another one that came last summer, took a long time to get into the team, get an opportunity. Did a decent enough job, to be fair, when he came in. I thought he was okay. Didn't set the world alight or anything like that, but showed that he's got a bit of attacking prowess about him as well. Defensively, loves a tackle, never afraid to get his foot stuck in. So I don't know, Jace. I'm definitely looking for an upgrade at left back, and I believe there will be one coming. But there is an argument for me to say keep him for depth. But what do you think, keeping or selling?
I agree with you there. I was going to say he is experienced. He's only been there for one season at Milan, but he's an experienced player. So I wouldn't definitely be looking at him to be the first choice, but to have him in the squad for depth and maybe to go out and look for a first choice left back would probably be the right decision.
Yep, no, I'd agree. Absolutely, that's hopefully where they're going. But yeah, we'll see. Moving into midfield, I'm going to start with Juraj Kuchka. If you'd have asked me about 6 months ago, Jace, I'd have probably said keep without a shadow of a doubt. He's one of the most energetic, sort of tenacious midfielders in Serie A. Offers a lot defensively, work rate and all that. Doesn't have the quality on the ball to match that. He's very rarely have I seen him he dominates a game in the sense he puts himself about, but if you're asking for quality on the ball and sort of decisiveness in the final third, he hasn't got that. So for me, I think you can easily upgrade on him. I'm not saying go out and buy a world-class player to replace him, but I think you can get a sort of an average younger player to come in and do the same job but better. So again, played a role this season, but for me, I think time to go at the end of the season.
Yeah, I mean, how old is he now? It's about 30, is he?
Yeah, I think he's approaching that sort of way.
Yeah, I think a lot of these players, unfortunately for them, I guess, the fact that Milan are going through this kind of change with the ownership and the board are looking to spend, really. I mean, you kind of looking at players and thinking they're average, and maybe any other season you'd think maybe stick with him, but the fact that you can go out and get an upgrade is kind of like, well, there's no point of having him in the squad, is there? I guess, like you say, he's energetic, but quality is just not there. And I think if you've got the means to go out and buy better quality, I think definitely have to be done.
Yep, no, I agree. I think there has been certain rumours over the past week suggesting that there's interest in him. So I'm kind of expecting him to go, but we'll have to wait and see. This is an interesting one, Jace. I'm not split on it at all, but there are rumours going around that he's potentially going to go out on loan next season, which I don't want to see, but I'll get your take on it first. Manuel Locatelli, keep or sell?
I would keep in the club, but I think a loan move would be good for him, especially if what happened this season repeats itself, where he spent a lot of time out on the bench. I think that's no good for him, no good for the club going forward. As I see him as being, one for the future, really. But he needs to be getting his playing time. So I'll definitely keep him as a Milan player, but maybe loan him out, get him some first team football somewhere else, let him develop, and then bring him back when he's ready.
Yeah, well, I definitely 100% agree with you on the keep side of things. Got to keep him. Do not want to see this guy sold anytime soon. I'm torn on the loan part, though. I see the argument to send him out on loan, as you mentioned there. I don't know, Jace. I just feel like I don't want him to get lost in that sort of loan circle where it's just he gets sent out, we buy other players, replace him in the squad, kind of becomes the forgotten man, and then all of a sudden you're looking at a sort of prestigious young talent, doesn't become the sort of Milan player that everyone expected him to be. So
Yeah,
I'm a little bit apprehensive about him going out on loan. I understand from the playing time side of things, yep, absolutely, but I really would like to see him kind of be developed in-house and kind of come through, and even if it's sort of a bit part role next season, just keep him around, new players coming in, train with them day in, day out. It might even improve him as a player that way, but
yeah.
I see the other side of the argument for sure. But
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying, but I mean, just from what happened this season, he seemed not to like being on the sidelines. So I don't know how he'd react to having a bit part role
yeah,
again this season. But that is a good argument, I think. I'm not necessarily going to say other players. It's just kind of we've seen that Locatelli doesn't react well to not playing, but. Yeah, I see what you mean. Being part of the squad, and if he does get his chance, through injury or whatever, if he does perform well, then he's locked down a starting spot in the team, and that'll be his. But I think if he goes out and he's guaranteed first team football, then it is up to him to kind of show to Milan that you should have kept me there,
yeah,
and then he can come back and essentially walk into the first team.
yeah. No, it's an interesting one. I think Montella has suggested that, yeah, he's a top talent and looking forward to working with him again next season. But then those rumours are not going away. There is interest for loan moves elsewhere. So
Do you think it's him putting it out there?
potentially his agent might be meddling and kind of either A, genuinely looking for that loan move, or B, putting pressure on Milan to kind of say, you've got a good one here, play him, or we'll take him elsewhere, kind of thing. But yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if it's sort of more of a strategic move from someone. But like I said, have to wait over the summer, see how it develops. Moving into the third spot of midfield, got Matty Fernandes, Jace. I think it was against Bologna we spoke about him. Came off the bench and was decisive, a couple of assists. Served his purpose for me, Jace. I think he's come in, he's done a decent job this season. Montella knows him from the Fiorentina days. But if you're looking at a Milan wanting to challenge for a top 3 spot next season, same sort of similar argument to the Kuchka one. I think you can do better. Personally,
yeah. I'd actually keep Fernandes, just because, like you say, he does have decisive moments. He is a very experienced player, and you're going to be battling on two domestic front and European front, as well as the domestic cup competitions. So to have that kind of depth, and you may not be week in, week out, but I'm sure Thursday night in the Ukraine somewhere, do you know what I mean? He'll could pop up with some decisive assists or goals. So I think for now, I wouldn't look to move him on. But yeah, definitely look at probably an upgrade in terms of a starter, and then have him in the squad.
Yeah, that's a fair argument. I wouldn't be against it. I'd definitely be fine with it if he did stay as depth, but all depends on who else comes in. I think I'm not expecting Milan to buy 2-3 starters for the midfield and then on the top of that buy depth players as well. I'm not quite sure they've got the pockets to kind of go that far this summer, so someone's going to have to stay.
Yeah, I think that's the issue. It's difficult buying depth players, essentially convincing the player to join where they know they're essentially going to be sitting on the bench. That's the only difficulty, really.
No, very true. Well, I think you converted me on that one. Then fine, I'll change that one to keep. He's he can certainly do a job for us, and he's more sort of influential than the other guys. So yeah, maybe keep him then. Suso, Jace. I think we both will agree on this one. Keep.
Yeah, definitely. Great player, Suso. Only young, still 23. I think he's probably, I wouldn't say, actually, I would go out and say probably one of the better players in the current squad. Probably, probably the leader in midfield, definitely on the pitch. I think he does a lot. When he plays well, I think it's evident that Milan play well. So definitely got to keep him, I think.
Yep, couldn't agree more with that one. Form has kind of dipped off in recent weeks since he came back from injury. But you put that to the side and look at what he did through the first half of the season and the player that he can develop into still. There's every reason to keep him. So definitely certain problems with his contract renewal. I think they've delayed it slightly heading into the summer, which is a bit of a concern. But if we can 100% keep, that's without saying. So that's Suso. Jace, we've reached a point where I'm going to have to hand it over to you first and let you talk about Mr. Carlos Bacca.
Your mate Bacca. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that penalty miss was disgraceful. He might as well had a sign on his head saying, keep on putting it right. Yeah. But I think he's got to go, isn't he? He hasn't had the impact that, I thought he'd have. I think many people did think he'd have more of a positive impact, but he's been pretty average. I think definitely with the funds as well, that's probably the first position Milan will be looking to strengthen. So I think it's a shame really for me. Well, not for me, for Carlos, because I think he could have been a good move. Going like he was tearing it up in Spain, doing well in Europe, especially the fact that Milan are back in his favourite competition. So the fact that he hasn't been working out is a bit of a shame. But yeah, he has to go really, and better quality needs to be brought in.
Yeah. I know it is real. When you put it like that, it is a shame to think. When he did arrive, it was almost like, yep, this is our bomber up front. He's going to score 20 plus goals every year. It's brilliant, but for whatever reason, JC, it hasn't worked. I look at the system and say it doesn't work for him, but then I know you've mentioned on previous podcasts that it was a very similar sort of setup at Sevilla. So I'm not quite sure what's gone wrong, but it has gone wrong, and he just, like we've mentioned before countless times, he doesn't offer. If you're not scoring goals, okay, but if you're not contributing to play, build up play, holding the ball up, doing the little things as a striker, then you're just a liability on the pitch for me. He definitely falls into that bracket, unfortunately. So yeah, I'm very much in the sell camp on that one. Honda, of course, but then to wrap up the kind of starting lineup from the weekend, but we know he's going anyway, so contract's up.
Yeah, that's a shame. I think it would have been good to keep Honda.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Just as a squad player.
Yeah, I mean, we spoke about him. I think we had a question in one of the podcasts in terms of should Honda be given more time on the pitch, and my argument at that point, I think both you and Jack agreed with me, was yes, because that was at a point when Montella kept bringing Ocampos off the bench, wasn't working, and Honda was just sitting there doing nothing. It was like, well, give him a crack, why not? See what he can do, and we saw what he did with that free kick against Bologna 2 weeks ago, so it is a shame. You're right. I think could have been a decent enough sort of squad player, but he's going to move on, and I'm sure he'll find some first team football elsewhere. But moving to the bench, Jace, Ocampos. A lot of people were actually impressed with him at the weekend. He did some positive stuff, but when he first replaced Suso after he got injured, it was just his season in a nutshell for me. There was a couple of misplaced crosses, one that was too deep, went out for a goal kick. He tried to dribble past the defender, couldn't get past him. It was just the same old rubbish, to be quite honest with you. And he's on loan, so it's not a case of keep or selling as such, but I definitely wouldn't be turning that loan deal into a permanent one anytime soon. Yeah,
I agree. I think if he wasn't on loan, I'd probably say keep, just to get the numbers up. Because losing Honda, losing Bacca, going to be short on attackers, but the fact that he is on loan, I'd say, send him back and maybe possibly look to get another loan player in. As we talked before, it's difficult to kind of buy squad players, isn't it? It's hard, but I don't know. Maybe if he wants to stay, I'd maybe look at extending it for another season. But letting him know, we are actively looking for a starting centre forward, and if you make some appearances and you kind of prove yourself, then maybe you'll get more playing time. But Yeah, I don't think he should be a Milan player permanently, but if it's a long deal, if he wants to stay, I think it could benefit the club just to have him there to up the numbers. You know, as we said earlier, now that we're in Europe, going to need extra legs really.
Yeah, I like how you said now we're in Europe as well. That's nice.
Yeah,
Uh,
I'm Milan all the way, mate.
good man. No, fair enough. I can't say I'm going to change my mind on this one. I've seen enough of him to kind of, in my opinion, make the choice that it's time to look elsewhere. But you never know. You might see him at San Siro next season. We'll have to wait and see. Lapadula, Jace. Was it me and you that differed on him last week when I said he's a good guy to have as a sort of second choice striker? Or...
Yeah, we did. I said get rid of him.
There you go. So I'm guessing it's a sell from you, is it?
Oh well, no, it's changed.
Yes.
It's changed only because again the numbers thing. That's why I'd keep a Campos, but I think Lapadula is the better option to have off the bench out of the two. But again, the attack is looking a bit light, and with how things are in the transfer market, going out and buying two strikers, that could be the 250 million like done. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So gotta keep him. Got to keep him. I think definitely. Again, he is good, he does have a lot of energy when he comes on. But his goal scoring isn't up there for me, I think. But he does kind of add something to the team when he comes on, especially with that high tempo that he likes to play with. It's just having someone, next to him or a little bit further than him who's a better finisher. Yeah. So I think maybe he hasn't been done any favours by the fact that he's when he comes on, he's playing up with Bacca, who doesn't really do much. So it'll be interesting to see him with someone else who has the same sort of legs and running as him, see if that improves his game.
Yeah, no, fair enough. I'm definitely in the keep side of things. It's like you said, it's pretty much everything you did say. Tempo-wise, coming off the bench, giving everybody a lift, whether it's with his energy, his pressing. Absolutely agree. His finishing needs to improve. He needs to score more goals, which I'm kind of surprised considering he was top scorer in Serie B last season. So I did expect him to score more, but maybe the sort of not enough sort of regular playing time has knocked him off his stride or something. I don't know, but yeah, I'd definitely keep him for depth. Again, I wouldn't not start him consistently next season. I'd like to see a top striker arrive, but I believe Lapadula's got a big role to play off the bench, and like you mentioned earlier, in terms of games in Ukraine on a Thursday night, get Lapadula to roll his socks up, put his gloves on, get out on the pitch, and do us a favour. So I think it'd be decent to keep him. And then just to finish us off, the last substitute was Christian Zapata. Obviously, the highs were the Derby goal where he scored in the dramatic equaliser, fantastic. But he's one of those, Jace, where you might disagree completely, but he's been there long enough now to prove himself, to kind of establish himself as one of the top choice central defenders. He hasn't been able to do it consistently, and my biggest reservation with him, and a couple of the other guys to be fair, is he was one of those guys in the last 3 or 4 years that was part of that struggle where Milan were finishing 7th, 8th, just completely off the pace.
Yeah.
Is it a risk to kind of keep someone like that with that, I wouldn't say losing mentality, that's kind of probably a bit harsh, but do you know what I mean? In terms of he's been through that struggle, he hasn't been up to the standard, it's time to just scrap it, move on and bring some fresh faces, a fresh mentality into the team? Or how are you seeing that? Are you seeing that as a depth, maybe another depth option?
That's the only thing. I think depth, he does bring experience. I do agree with what you say. He was there during the bad times, and maybe that is a negative mark against him. But I think, especially in Serie A, having that experience, and he's a strong guy, isn't he? He's very physical. He could come in handy, especially those cold nights in Russia. I think I would keep him. I'd side towards keeping him, but only as an option off the bench, or for those European games. But I don't think he's a starting Milan player for me.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. I think we can reach a sort of middle ground. I'd sell, but again, like you say, depending on who else leaves, if Paletta leaves and Gomez potentially goes, then we've got to keep someone. So maybe Zapata's the man to keep. So yeah, bit torn on that one, but certainly not a starting defender for me next season. But we'll have to see. Jace, one man that didn't feature on Sunday, but he has now played his last game for Milan. He'll return to Everton and then potentially Barcelona. Is Gerard Deulofeu. Talk to me, Jace. I think I've kind of made my feelings clear on it. He arrived, everything was good. He was making a big difference for the team. He was grabbing a couple of goals and assists here and there. But then came the sort of inconsistency that you actually warned me about, because you saw it at Everton previously as well. Not enough composure in the final third, and just generally not the sort of influential player that we needed. Heading back to Everton, of course, Barcelona, but is it assess his kind of stint with us? Do you think it was a successful one for him personally, or do you think it was sort of a useful kind of situation for Milan, but it's time to move on?
I think it definitely benefited Milan more than it did Deulofeu. I think he popped up with a few important goals, some important assists, and the fact that we're in Europe now means his contribution definitely added to that. Maybe without his goals and his assists, we wouldn't be there. So that's definitely a plus. But I mean, for him, he didn't set the world alight, did he? When he was there, you mentioned he did have a good introduction, but then after that, it kind of petered off a little bit. And I don't think he did enough to kind of convince his parent club to keep him or to fight for him. I think he's going to go back to Barca so they can make a nice little profit out of him. I don't think he's going to be playing there. Yeah. So it's a bit of a shame for him, because he's kind of going to be left in kind of no man's land. I think I'm not sure if Milan would want to keep him if they had the option. Everton definitely don't want to keep him, and Barcelona don't want to keep him. So he's a bit of an unwanted lad, isn't he? Which is a shame. But maybe he'll think about it, and he'll realise he has to do more. He can't just show up, these odd little nice sort of step overs and nice assists once in a while. He needs a bit more consistency. I think that's his downfall, is just lack of consistency.
Yep, absolutely. I think kind of the things that I'm hearing, Milan have kind of moved on now. I think they're going to look in a different direction, and the latest reports suggest that he's not going to come back next season. I think Montella did hint at the suggestion that I'd like to work with him again, but something tells me that we might be looking elsewhere now. But like you said, successful in parts. Just the inconsistency was the killer for me. Just when I looked to him to dominate games and be that sort of shining light to break through against teams, he wasn't always there. Didn't have that composure. So decent stint, but I think we can do better. Hopefully with the money at our disposal. So fingers crossed we can get someone to come in that does the job even better. So good stuff. Jace, quick season review. I want to talk about the highs and lows of the campaign and then give it a final mark out of 10. Obviously, the highlights were winning the Super Cup, beating Juve in Doha on penalties. That was, without a doubt, one of my favourite moments of the season, of course.
Always nice to beat Juve, mate.
Of course, mate, absolutely. Qualifying for the Europa League, return to Europe, absolutely fantastic. And then just to kind of pick out some smaller, if you like, sort of aspects of the campaign. The continuation of seeing Donnarumma and Locatelli develop. Always good to see your young guns come through and shine on the big stage. So I was pleasantly surprised with Locatelli in particular, but Donnarumma's sort of level of consistency, that maturity and all those great things. I think it's been good to see him establish himself even more. So that's definitely a positive. And then the big one for me is, of course, just finally seeing the takeover completed. I think I've lost count the number of times I came on here and moaned to you and Jack about this is the latest in the takeover. I'm not sure if it's going to happen. And to finally see it complete, happen, absolute massive positive for me. So those are the highs. But the
little podcast drama there that was keeping us filled in every week.
certainly was. What's the biggest one out of those ones for you in terms of what's the biggest achievement that Milan look back and think, we won silverware, or getting back into Europe, or what would you say is the sort of most impressive?
I think getting back into Europe, especially was it 3 years, isn't it, outside of Europe? To get back, I think having that in conjunction with the takeover, it kind of feels like a hurdle's been kind of jumped over, and kind of a turn has been cornered, a corner's been turned, as it were. Because you're back in Europe, and now you have the means to really compete there. So we have the means. Sorry, I need to get used to that habit. But it's very exciting. I think having the two is nice, but definitely from a team achievement, it's definitely getting back into Europe and finishing it above Inter as well, which you didn't put down there to me, which is definitely always a big one for me.
That's very true. Well, that's my fault. But no, I'd have to agree. Like I said, winning the Super Cup, beating Juve, penalties, all that drama was absolutely brilliant. But over the course of a season, to see us get over that hurdle, get back into Europe, that's got to be the biggest high for me out of the lot. And in terms of lows, Jace, we've got the kind of inconsistency and problems against the smaller teams, which came back to haunt us on countless occasions. It was, pretty much a repeat performance week in, week out against some of those teams, which was really disheartening and pretty ridiculous. But yeah, absolutely inconsistency, one of the lows. And then just the struggles of kind of individuals and the lack of quality in the team, which kind of goes hand in hand with the other low, in fact, breaking down those smaller teams, inferior teams. You've spoken about it, and we brought it back to Montella as well a couple of weeks ago. His comments, saying it's easier to get up for games against Roma and Inter. It's less easy to get against, Empoli and those guys. But those are definitely lows that need to be fixed ahead of next season, though.
Yeah, definitely. I think it is purely mental and about the preparation. I think definitely we've got the quality to beat those teams. It's just whether or not we're giving them the respect that they deserve in the sense that, it's not going to be as easy as just turning up. You need to play, and they're going to be up for it as well. Getting a scalp like Milan, it's still, a big name, AC Milan, with what the club's achieved and the history. So to get 3 points against Milan, I think Montella has to understand that pretty much everyone in that league is going to want to get a win against Milan. So he needs to take those smaller games more seriously and understand that, for some of those opposition players, this might be the highlight of their season. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Going to the San Siro and getting a result. So he needs to take that more seriously, especially next season if we want to compete for, to get nearer the top of the table, and especially in Europe, we're going to be playing a lot of kind of nobody teams, as it were. But they want to get as far as they can in that competition, and we saw what happened to Tottenham against Ghent. Had to mention that, but they just didn't take them seriously. I think all the fans I spoke to were, when they got Ghent, they're kind of like, this is easy, like we can win the Europa League.
Yeah.
But obviously it didn't happen because they didn't take Ghent seriously. So definitely to take all the opponents seriously. And Montella's, I think he would address that. I think it's probably a positive that it's happened end of this season, but hasn't affected the European challenge. And you can look at it next season and understand he has to do more in those games.
Yep, absolutely agree. In terms of final mark out of 10, I'd probably give them a 7. I think, don't want to be too harsh about it. I think if to put the season into context with the fact that Montella didn't have the funds to go out and buy players throughout the season with the ongoing delays with the takeover, bring that into consideration, coupled with the players that he had at his disposal. I don't think they quite fitted what he wanted to kind of build there, but I'm sure he'll address that this summer. And you kind of weigh that up with finishing 6th, winning the Super Cup. I think there are definitely, like we've mentioned, positives and negatives, but I think 7's a fair enough mark out of 10. Do you agree, or do you go higher or lower?
I go a little bit higher. I think you have to look at the targets at the start of the season. I'm pretty sure the main target would have been to get back into Europe, possibly Champions League, but that may have been very difficult. But to get back into Europa League, I think, is a massive, massive, massive achievement. So I'd say so. Yeah, 7-12. I'd probably edge it 7.5. Just that little extra sprinkle for finishing above Inter. But yeah.
Good, Pat. Good chat. No, fair enough. 7.5. Sounds good to me. Good stuff, Jace. So that's a wrap for 2016-2017 season. Moving forward, one off the pitch sort of story that caught my eye over the past week was the return of Reno. Gattuso's back, Jace. He's back as coach of the youth team for the next 2 years. Really happy to see him back. He's one of my favourite players. That whole generation, wasn't everyone's cup of tea. I'm sure there's a lot of people that really hated him, but he kind of embodies all that sort of grit and determination and all the good things that I loved watching when I was watching football growing up. But on the flip side of that, I think it's now really important that he makes a success of this return. I don't want it to be that sort of sentimental, gimme kind of, comeback. It's not really working. I want him to kind of establish himself in that role with the potential to potentially maybe become manager of the senior team one day. I'm sure that's his kind of ambition. He said he's not ready for that. He knows he's not ready for that yet, but eventually, I'm sure he's eyeing that Montella's job at some stage. But I know you've kind of said in your Arsenal podcast and stuff about how you'd like to see the likes of Vieira come back, whether it's Overmars or Bergkamp. Got to be positive to see an old legend come back, if anything, kind of just to help re-establish that culture of winning and stuff like that. No.
Yeah, definitely. Especially one as big as Gattuso. I think to get him back in the fold, get him back in the coaching staff, to get him around the club, the aim's got to be to get him in that top job. As eventually the manager of AC Milan, and this is a great start for him. I know he's managed at other clubs, but to come back as a coach, especially the youth team, potentially players he may be managing in the future. If he does make it there, I think it's great, and see a lot more clubs doing this. I think it's quite smart to get ex players in, get them working with the youth, and then they kind of build a relationship, and then it's kind of a bit easier for them just to step into that top job, because majority of the players they've known for years and worked with them for years. So it's a great move. I think it's a sign that the club's definitely building towards the future.
100%. Well, to be honest, it didn't really cross my mind about that. Just coming through with that youth group and potentially getting, sort of promotion up to the senior squad together. That's definitely a great show.
I mean, we saw it with again, to mention Tottenham. There's a positive point this time. We saw it with Sherwood. He worked with the youth, and then he was able to bring in a player like Harry Kane, who wasn't getting a shout at all. We saw it as well with Brendan Rodgers, who was youth coach at Chelsea, worked with Sturridge. Didn't work for him there, but when Brendan Rodgers got his job at Liverpool, he was able to give Daniel that chance, and we saw they almost won the league. Was it 2 points off City? Yeah. So it could have major positives in the fact that a lot of these young players get overlooked when the head coach is focused on the first team, and they're desperately trying to impress. But then, if a guy that they've worked with for years suddenly gets that top job, then kind of that player will be in the forefront of their mind. Like, oh, I really like this guy. I've worked with him. I trust him. Let me give him a chance. So, could have massive positive effects on the club.
Yep, absolutely. So, fingers crossed for that. I think another interesting part of what he spoke about was that he mentioned he's going to closely kind of follow what Montella's doing with the senior team, in the sense that the youth teams are going to play the same system, the same kind of style, just to show that sort of continuation, that consistency through the levels. So those youth players will be ready for that step up when it comes. So all sorts of positives for me.
Get that culture in the club, isn't it? Get that that playing style, and it kind of be a bit like Arsenal in a sense. They have the play the Arsenal way. It's kind of like the motto that goes through all the youth teams. Starting as low as like the under nines, I think they have that play the Arsenal way, and it's kind of like developing players who are ready just to walk into the first team eventually, and not be out of place.
Well, all sounds good to me. So fingers crossed. Like I said, he does make a success of this now, and we'll see him hopefully in the top job one day if he's good enough. But all good on that front.
See him there slapping his assistant coaches.
Oh yeah, I remember. Oh, I'll have none of that, Reno. Oh, dear. Good stuff. Right, Jace, obviously the big one that's been sort of dominating headlines ever since Sunday, essentially, and before that, in fact, transfers. What a day to be alive, Jace.
Yeah.
We had Frank Kessie come in for his medical today. He did encounter some very minor problems, but I'm led to believe that it's not going to affect the transfer. He's still definitely coming, so I'm sure that will happen in the course of the next week or so. So he was in for
Yeah.
his medical.
What were the issues with him?
A slight problem with his knee cartilage or something, I
Yeah.
think they picked up in the tests. But again, from what I'm hearing, all the reporters were suggesting that it's one of those where he will undergo a few more tests and it's not something to be massively concerned with. So,
Cool.
yeah.
I thought you were going to say they found out he was actually 35 years old.
No, fortunately not. I think he's still 20, so that's fine.
Okay.
All good. And then obviously we had Matteo Masaccio. He's officially unveiled as a Milan player. He passed his medical last week, but he posed with the shirt and all that fancy stuff today, so that was nice. And then we had the added bonus of Montella signing a renewal, all in one day, Jace. It's absolutely fantastic on Twitter today. He was sort of had a contract till the end of 2018, but he's added another year on that, so he's now there till 2019, which is great news.
Yep.
Want to speak on Kessie and Masaccio first, though, Jace. Personally, for me, I think it's an absolutely fantastic way to start the transfer window and early. We know we've obviously got Europa League qualifiers coming, so we have to start early and get everything ready for pre-season. But they just strike me as two really strong core signings to kick things off. You've got Masaccio as your sort of central defensive leader next to Romagnoli. And then you've got, that powerhouse Kessie in the middle of the pitch, just dominating games. You've got to be impressed with those two signings to start things off, with more to come as well.
Definitely. I mean, like you mentioned it there, Mustachio, the central defender, and Kessie, the man who's hopefully going to be the pivotal player in the middle. And then you're just hoping within the next week that centre forward will sign, and then you've got the spine, which is what you need to build the team around. Hopefully as well, keeping Donnarumma.
Yep.
So you're looking at having, the big man Donnarumma at the back, got your two central defenders nailed down, Suso and Kessie in the middle, and then it's, like I say, just about getting that striker down, and then you can look about adding the other players. But it's looking like it's taking shape pretty early. Like you say, they need to get a move on because of the Europa League, but definitely positive steps, and hopefully this continues.
Absolutely. And another thing that kind of struck me about it was the money involved. You might disagree again, but that's fine. I mean, for me, 18 million euros on Masaccio, 28 million euros on Kessie. We're talking about two players. Well, Masaccio's coming up to the prime of his career. He's 26. Kessie's 20, so he's obviously got a long career ahead of him. In the modern day game, the transfer window, where we're seeing players go for, I think Bernardo Silva, for example, 43 million the other week. Pogba, obviously, the easiest example for 90. Those kind of crazy figures flying around. This also strikes me as really good business as well.
It is definitely the fact that everyone knows you're being taken over.
Yeah.
It's funny you mentioned City, because I remember a time when, they got their money, obviously, and it seems like they brought everyone from Arsenal who had a year left on their contract for like 20 odd million. And you're thinking, these players are never worth that. It's just everyone's just kind of milking City. And the same with Bernardo Silva, 43 million for Bernardo Silva. He's a great player, but I don't think he's worth 43 million.
Yeah.
Is Sterling worth 50 million? Stones worth 45? It's like, I was expecting everyone to try and do the same with Milan. Thought Mustachio would be suddenly, if anyone else wants to buy him 18 million, if Milan want to buy him, it's 28 million.
Yeah.
But yes, it's good, great business, I think.
No, I'm really impressed with that side of things as well. So that's another positive out of all of it. But speaking on the striker, Jace, we kind of spoke about it last week in terms of options. There were a number of names flying around. The kind of feeling that I'm getting now is that they're settling on Morata. That seems to be where things are going. He's the one that's heavily linked with a move. Talk today of 60 million euros for Real Madrid to snap him up. Big wages as well, so it's going to cost us. I'm going to dig deep into those pockets, Mr. Lee. But I think we spoke about it last week. We assessed the options, and I voted for Morata out of him, Aubameyang and Belotti, I think it was in the end.
Yeah.
Just give me your thoughts of him as a player, and more importantly, do you see him as an individual that kind of can lead this team next season?
Yeah, definitely. I think he's a top player. I think last week I did go for Belotti, didn't I?
Yeah,
But I think it's kind of for me, it's kind of evens between him and Belotti. But he's a great player. We saw what he did with Juve. He didn't really get a chance at Madrid, but he got Juve to that Champions League final, didn't he? Essentially single-handed. Well, him and Pogba were definitely the two outstanding players of that campaign. But yeah, I think for him, he knows the league. He scored goals in this league, so to come and do it for Milan with the right players behind him, I think it'd be a great signing. Definitely a massive upgrade on what's already there.
yeah, no, that's that for sure. No, yeah, I'll be happy with it. It's a lot of money. I will say that. I think that one potentially is quite overpriced. I wouldn't say he's worth 60, but as a player and what he brings to a team, especially I've moaned about Baka's link-up play, ability to hold the play up. I think Morata can do all those. He ticks all those boxes, and like you said, he can score in this league as well, which is massive. So
Yeah,
all round,
yeah,
I'd be pretty happy to see him come in if he's the next big marquee signing. That'd be great. Just to touch on Donnarumma, we've obviously spoken about him, but the drama continues to rumble on with his future. It basically comes down to this, Jace. So Milan are making their best offer financially for him. They're buying these players. They're putting that strategy in front of him, and saying, "Look, this is what we're building. We want you to be frontline centre of it. Sign the contract, or do you know what? We can't have a goalkeeper with an expiring contract. We're going to have to consider our options and potentially bring someone else in." Add to that mix your mate Mino Raiola, who continues to make things 10 times more
yeah.
difficult.
Money man Raiola.
Yes. I'm a bit concerned, I'm not going to lie. I think for the first time, Fasone has started mentioning plan B in terms of, bringing someone else in if we have to sell him, if he's not going to sign a new deal. Bear in mind, Montella and Fasone have both said that the indication they get from Donnarumma is that he will sign. What's your take on the whole situation? Do you see him staying? And is it sensible from Milan to make that plan B just in case, in the event that he does leave?
Yeah, I think it is sensible. I do think generally he, as an individual, wants to stay, but I think it is all Raiola, trying to mastermind some another big payout. Really, I think I mentioned before on a previous pod that I was convinced that he'd be going to Manchester United, as Raiola seems to be the dealer for Manchester United, just getting all his players over there. So I do think there is a little bit of politics going on. I think Donnarumma, like I said, wants to stay, but it's the people in his ear, people in his camp telling him, he should make a big money move to United. But so whether or not, I think this all depends on whether or not United keep De Gea. If they do, then I think, he'll stay. If they don't, I think his agent will do everything he can to try and get him over to Manchester. But it's a shame, really, because he's a Milan player, Milan youth player, came through the ranks. Kind of want him to be like the next big thing over there in Milan. The next, I don't know how many years he could be there, like Buffon was at Juve. But
Yeah.
it's again the money in football. It's a shame, isn't it? It kind of makes it difficult. If it wasn't all about the money, you'd say, Milan born. Milan players definitely staying, but right now it's just up in the air, isn't it?
It really is. It's just poignant that it's the same week that Totti said goodbye to Roma as well.
Yeah.
You look at that and you kind of think that's never going to happen again in this day and age, like that sort of loyalty and financial aspects of it all. You're not going to get a one club player, if ever, anymore. So
Yeah.
certainly a shame, but
John Terry as well, leaving this
exactly.
season.
Yep, there you go. So it's
I think
definitely
they're the last of their kind, aren't they?
really is. But in an ideal world, I'd love to see Donnarumma stay, but I think Milan hierarchy are dealing it with it absolutely perfectly. Just I'm not quite sure. There was kind of rumours about ultimatums, potentially maybe making him sit in the stands next season if he doesn't want to sign the new deal. I wouldn't go that far. I think that's a bit far fetched, but
Yeah,
I think it's, you've got to put the pressure on at this point. We're doing our part, be a part of it. If not, you go find something else, and we're going to make our own plan. I think that's brilliant. No player's bigger than the club, so that's
definitely not.
That's a pretty good way of going about it for me. And then quickly, Jace, just to wrap things up on the transfer side of things, just to run through my ideal / realistic 11 for next season. I didn't want to, start playing FIFA and cheating and making transfers that nobody not going to happen. But
Yeah,
so let's just run through it really quickly. Obviously, I want Donnarumma to stay, so he'd be my man between the posts. We'll start with defence next, obviously. Conti at right back from Atalanta. I'd like to see him sign. I've been really impressed with him. Musacchio's in. Partner him up with Romagnoli. And then, by all accounts, Ricardo Rodriguez is on his way from Wolfsburg. So that's your back line sorted. Midfield, Kessie. Bilia from Lazio. He's been heavily linked. Apparently we've got personal terms on lock, but it's a case of now finding an agreement with Lazio. I think if you're looking at a realistic sort of addition, I think he's probably, up there. So I'd stick him in the middle, and then Bonaventura to complete that trio. And then the front three, Suso, Morata, and then Alejandro Gomez from Atalanta. Lots of names being banded around, within Serie A from around Europe. But again, looking at it realistically, if you're going to spend 60 million on Morata, I don't then think you're going to spend 30 plus whatever million on a winger. I think you've got to weigh it up and kind of judge it on that basis. So that's my ideal / realistic 11. Impressed? Would you like any sort of changes to that, or just any specific players that you're not convinced by, or you've got another player in mind that you might think, hold on, he might do a better job there?
No, I think that's a good starting 11. Definitely one that can challenge for those top 5, top 4 spots in Serie A, possibly even top 3, depending on the movement that goes on at Roma, goes on at Lazio, and so on and so forth. But there's a lot of money being splashed around there, though. I know Kessie and Musacchio's already signed good deals. I don't know how much Rodriguez is supposed to be signing for, but definitely.
Yeah, he's in the range of 15 to 18 or something like that, I think. So
that's reasonable, very, very reasonable. But then, going out and buying Gomez, Biglia,
Morata.
Conti, Morata as well. But I think mainly that the rivals from other Italian teams, that's always a thing, that no one wants to lose a player to a rival. So they're going to... I don't know what the contract situation is as well, if they've got years left. If they have, then you're probably looking at trying to prize them away with a big fee if clubs don't have to sell. That's the only issue. But I think definitely it's a good team, got some experience in there, all players who've already played in Syria. So it's not like you'd be expecting them to have to bed into the league. It's kind of like hit the ground running. So yeah, that could be a team that, in all seriousness, especially if you may lose Allegri, then that could be a little bit unsettling for them, and then kind of a bit of a potential there to just steal in.
Yeah,
but looking good.
No, I think Well, I take your point. I think Billy is the only one with a contract expiring. He's got 12 months on his, so he's probably... That's why I kind of stuck him in the middle, because I think realistically, like you mentioned, you're not going to smash out 50 million on every single player. So hopefully we can drive his price tag down a little bit. But I think the other guys are all on decent contracts, so it's going to be a tough job to prize them all away. But
that's the only thing, because Atlanta had a good season, so it's not like they're kind of bottom of they're above Milan, so it's kind of like can't go stealing already got Kessie off them, just stealing all their players.
Very true, that is true. But exciting times though. We'll have to wait and see how many of those arrive, or others that arrive. Would be a different team for sure, so we'll have to wait and see. Just to quickly move over to Twitter questions next, Jace. Jack couldn't be bothered to be on the pod, but he had time to give us a question. He asked, if offered a straight swap between selling Donnarumma for 45 million and signing a new keeper plus Belotti or Morata, Would you do it? A simple answer for Jack is no. In an ideal world, I wouldn't sell Donnarumma for anyone or anything. Again, that obviously depends, as we've spoken about. If he doesn't sign the contract, if he wants to leave, then yes, I would reconsider my stance. But as we sit here today, 100%, I don't want him to be going anywhere. So I wouldn't be willing to do any sort of swap deal at this stage. Was that something that you would consider if you were in their shoes, Jace, or would you agree with me?
I think, ideally you want to keep Donnarumma, but with, the rumours that are going around about him potentially not signing and, Raiola lurking in the background waiting for his payday, I think at the minute there's a few keepers who you could prize away. I mean, Szczesny is supposedly on his way back to Arsenal. Had a great season in Serie A. I think best goalkeeper in Europe, according to the stats.
Yeah. He's
So
actually been linked, by the way. That Plan B situation. He was one of the names that was in that list. So he might well be up for grabs.
Yeah. So I mean, if you got 45 million and you could price Szczesny away for, I don't know, between 20 and 30, that would be good business, I think, because Donnarumma is definitely, he's a great keeper now, but he's definitely one for the future in terms of he won't hit his peak yet, but Szczesny seems to be at his peak.
Yeah.
So to get him in, you have an instant impact, I think. But you always want to keep your boy Donnarumma, that we've mentioned. He's a Milan lad.
Yeah.
You want to keep him there, but if worst comes to worst, 45 million is good money for a 19-year-old. You know what I mean?
It's not bad.
I'd take that and then splash a little bit on Szczesny and get your big striker in.
Fair enough, Jace. Well, fingers crossed. We'll have to see
I don't want you to get Szczesny, by the way. I want him to get to Arsenal. But
next question was from Stefano. He asked, with recent transfers, has faith increased with the new owners? It's a 3-part question, so I'll just break it down with that question first. Absolutely. I think, my big thing was actually seeing Musacchio and Kessie turn up for their medicals and, put on the shirt. Those were the kind of turning points for me to think, yep, after all the talk, players are now starting to arrive. They're signing. They're on board with the project. They've obviously sold it well to them to want, for them to want to come. So everything's ticked in that case for me. So definitely faith is increasing. Is that something that you share in that as well, Jace?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, wasted no time. Like the season only finished 2 days ago and already got 2 players signed. So yeah, they're not messing around at all.
Definitely not. So that's 100% faith has increased in those guys. And then Stefano also asked, do you think Donnarumma will ultimately stay with Milan or should he leave? For me, again, as I just reiterate what we said earlier, 100%. I think he will stay. I do believe they'll eventually find an agreement and sort things out. It's just difficult for me to be non-biased. I mean, put that in front of him. If you satisfy his financial demands or Raiola's demands, whoever it is, putting the numbers together, you put this project in front of him and say, look at the players we're buying. We're going to compete. We're moving. We're going places. Where's the negative, Jace? I don't quite understand why you wouldn't want to sign, extend your stay, and commit to the club that you love. Effectively, I don't see the downside in it. So they're pretty much ticking all the right boxes for me.
Same. I don't even know why you need to show him who you're going to sign. He should want to sign. He's a Milan boy. He should desperately want to, especially the fact that you've made it into Europe now. It shouldn't be the fact that this is what we want to do in the next 5 years. He's only 19. He should sign a contract and play for his boyhood club as long as possible. So I think it is definitely all down to Raiola. It's about keeping him satisfied.
Yeah.
Maybe give him a little couple mil to keep quiet for a bit and get Donnarumma to sign, and job's a good one. But yeah, definitely got to keep him.
Yeah, well, it's a sad world we live in when we have to pay agents to stop making trouble, isn't it? But what can you do?
Yeah.
And then the final question for Stefano was, again, we've kind of touched on it, but how should Milan treat Lapadula? Keep him for depth or move him if the right deal comes? I'm glad to hear you've been swayed in that sense slightly, Jace. And I do believe Milan should keep him. Again, he hasn't shown this season his prolificness to kind of be the first choice top dog in the team. but I don't know who to compare him to. I'm kind of trying to find like that super sub comparison. I don't want to say Solskjaer, because Solskjaer was kind of goals galore. He's not that level, but just just that perfect impact player. I do believe that he's got that in him, and he can do that role next season behind a Morata or someone like that. So,
do you know who I compare him to?
Go on.
Danny Welbeck.
There you go. That's not a bad shout.
Danny Welbeck, he's full of running,
Yeah.
Great energy, doesn't score as much as he should. But when he's up there with, when he plays with a Sanchez, he'll do something that contributes to someone else scoring.
Yeah.
So his stats aren't the greatest, but when I watch Arsenal, I think Danny Welbeck's he does a lot that kind of goes unnoticed in a sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll definitely keep him. I think I've just thinking about that. I have completely done 180. Yeah, definitely got to keep Lapadula.
Good man. Well, there you go, Stefano. Thanks for that question. I've managed to convert Jace to a Lapadula fan, so all good. But yeah, appreciate that. Regular listener as well, Stefano. So thanks for the questions again this week. Jace, I think that wraps us up this week. Unless you had anything else you'd like to add.
No, I think that's it. It's all done.
Good man.
Got a lot covered.
Absolutely, and fingers crossed there'll be plenty more to cover next week as well, depending on how quickly this transfer stuff moves. So
yeah, might have the whole squad all signed up.
Exactly. So definitely a busy summer ahead. So very much looking forward to that. Jace, always a pleasure, mate.
Yep, always, mate.
Cheers, man. For those guys that haven't heard on Twitter, you can now check out acmilantalk.com for all your latest transfer rumour needs and opinion and latest news regarding the Rossoneri. But, Jace, that's it for this week, so there's nothing left but to say goodbye to the people.
Goodbye to the people.